Talia Reid smoothed down her chef's whites and stared up at the gleaming structure of the Nexus Embassy. The building, a bizarre fusion of human architecture and alien design, had appeared on the Washington skyline only 6 months ago, shortly after humanity's first contact with the ZK Theory Collective. "You sure you want to do this?" asked Dion, her sous chef from her previous restaurant. "There are plenty of Michelin-starred kitchens that would kill to have you." Talia adjusted her knife roll under her arm. "None of them are offering to triple my salary." "Yeah, but none of them have 7-foot-tall aliens with weird dietary requirements either." "That's exactly why they're paying so much," Talia said with a grin that masked her nervousness. "Besides, how many chefs get to put 'cooked for aliens' on their resume?" As she approached the security checkpoint, Talia's phone buzzed with a text from her brother, "Don't let them probe you." She rolled her eyes and tucked the phone away before presenting her credentials to the guard, human, thankfully. She'd been thoroughly briefed during the application process, but nothing quite prepared her for the reality of entering the embassy. Inside, the air carried an unfamiliar scent, something between ozone and cinnamon. The lighting pulsed subtly, almost imperceptibly, creating an atmosphere that wasn't quite uncomfortable but definitely alien. Chef Reid, a human liaison in a sleek gray uniform, greeted her. "I'm Raj Kapoor, Diplomatic Services. Welcome to Nexus. We've been expecting you." "Thank you," Talia replied, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "I'm excited to begin. Ambassador Vexlor is particularly interested in your arrival," Raj said, his expression carefully neutral. "Follow me to the culinary department." As they walked, Raj briefed her on protocols. "The ambassador has gone through 3 human chefs in the past 2 months, he mentioned casually. Talia nearly stopped walking. 3? The position listing just said there had been staff turnover. Well, technically that's accurate. Raj gave her a sympathetic look. None of them could satisfy his requirements. "I studied the ZK Theory digestive system briefing thoroughly," Talia protested. "Their biochemistry is compatible with most Earth proteins and carbohydrates. They can't digest certain compounds, but nothing impossible to work around. It's not the technical aspects that prove challenging," Raj said cryptically as they arrived at the embassy's kitchen, a space that resembled a cross between a high-end restaurant kitchen and a laboratory. Before Talia could ask for clarification, a deep, resonant voice spoke from the doorway. "So you are the new satisfaction provider." Ambassador Vexlor stood nearly 7 feet tall, with iridescent blue-green skin that seemed to shift color slightly with each movement. His 4 eyes, 2 large primary ones and 2 smaller eyes above, regarded her with unsettling intensity. His mouth, wider than a human's, curved into what she hoped was a smile. "Chef," Talia corrected automatically. "Chef Talia Reid." All 4 of the ambassador's eyes blinked in sequence. "Is there a meaningful distinction between these terms in your culture?" "Yes," Talia said firmly. "A chef creates food. We don't provide satisfaction as our primary function." Raj made a small choking sound beside her. To her surprise, Vexlor made a rumbling sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "Directness. Excellent." The others were too afraid to speak clearly. He moved closer, and Talia caught that strange cinnamon ozone scent more strongly. "But you are incorrect, Chef Reid. All beings seek to satisfy their hungers. Some are merely more honest about it than others." Vexlor gestured around the kitchen. "These facilities have been adapted to your specifications. You will prepare a meal for me this evening. Something that expresses." He paused, searching for the word, joy. "Joy isn't a flavor," Talia said. "Isn't it?" All 4 eyes focused on her. "Then perhaps that explains your predecessor's failures." With that cryptic statement, he turned to leave. "I will return at your Earth time of 7 p.m. I hunger for more than food, Chef Reed. Will you satisfy me? After he departed, Talia turned to Raj. What exactly does he mean by that? Raj sighed. That's what the other chefs couldn't figure out either. He headed for the door. Good luck, chef. For what it's worth, you've already lasted longer than the first one. Alone in the alien kitchen, Talia unpacked her knives with trembling hands. What had she gotten herself into? She stared at the unfamiliar equipment, the strange ingredients alongside the familiar ones. Joy, she muttered to herself. He wants to taste joy. She rolled up her sleeves. She hadn't become the youngest executive chef at Lumiere by backing down from challenges. Alien or not, Vexlor was just another demanding customer. And Talia Reed had never failed to deliver. By the time 7 p.m. arrived, Talia had transformed the kitchen into a proper workspace. She'd organized ingredients, tested equipment, and prepared a meal that she hoped would convey what Vexlor had requested, joy. The menu was built around memories that brought her happiness, her grandmother's honey-glazed carrots, reimagined with ZK-Theri-compatible spices, fresh bread with the aroma that had filled her childhood home, and a main course inspired by the dish that had won her first cooking competition at 19. When Vexlor entered, his skin rippled with colors that reminded Talia of northern lights she'd once seen in Alaska, another joyful memory. You have prepared sustenance, he stated, those 4 eyes scanning the carefully plated dish she presented. I've prepared more than that, Talia replied, gesturing for him to sit. This is a story told through food. She placed the appetizer before him, the carrots, glazed and arranged in a spiraling pattern. Before you eat, she said, surprising herself with her boldness, I want to explain something. On Earth, joy isn't just a feeling, it's often tied to memories and connections. Vexlor's head tilted. Proceed. These carrots are based on my grandmother's recipe. When I was 8, she taught me to cook them. It was the first dish I ever made that someone praised. Talia smiled at the memory. That's joy, creation and connection combined. The ambassador studied her face intently before lifting the utensil, a modified fork designed for ZK-Theri hands. He took a bite, then closed all 4 eyes. For several uncomfortable seconds, he remained utterly still. When his eyes reopened, they seemed to glow more vibrantly. There is resonance, he said finally. Continue. Throughout the meal, Talia narrated the significance behind each dish, the bread representing comfort, the main course symbolizing achievement. With each story and each bite, Vexlor's reactions became more pronounced. His skin colors shifted dramatically, and occasionally he made sounds the translator couldn't process. By dessert, a simple but perfect vanilla ice cream with honey, Vexlor was leaning forward with an intensity that might have been frightening if Talia hadn't been so focused on her work. This final dish, she explained, represents pure, uncomplicated happiness. The kind that needs no reason. Vexlor consumed the dessert slowly, methodically. When finished, he remained silent for so long that Talia wondered if she'd somehow offended him. Finally, he spoke. You have provided more than nutrition, Chef Reed. You have provided context. Is that good? Talia asked cautiously. It is satisfying. He rose from his seat, towering over her. Tomorrow, we will continue. Prepare a meal that expresses longing. After he departed, Talia sagged against the counter, exhausted but exhilarated. She'd passed the first test, though she wasn't entirely sure what the test had been. The next morning, she arrived to find Raj waiting for her, looking surprised. You're still here, he remarked. That's promising. What exactly happened to the other chefs? Talia asked as she began preparations for the day. Raj hesitated. The first quit after 3 days, claimed the ambassador was feeding on her emotions. The second lasted a week before having a breakdown, babbling about how the ambassador could taste his thoughts. The third. He shrugged. She just didn't show up on day 12. Talia's hands stilled over the vegetables she was chopping. And you didn't think to mention this before? Would you have taken the job if I had? She considered this, then resumed chopping. Probably. I don't scare easily. Good, Raj said, heading for the door. Because there's something you should know about the ZK theory. They're empathic absorbers. What does that mean? It means they don't just eat food, they absorb emotional resonances from what they consume. When a ZK theory eats something prepared by someone else, they don't just taste flavors, they experience echoes of the preparer's emotions and memories. Talia set down her knife. So yesterday when I told Vexlor about my grandmother. He wasn't just hearing your story, Raj confirmed. He was tasting it. Experiencing it. Absorbing it. That's. Talia searched for the right word. Intimate. Now you understand why the position pays so well, Raj said. And why finding the right chef has been challenging. You're not just feeding him, you're sharing your inner self. After Raj left, Talia stood motionless in the kitchen, reconsidering everything. Vexlor hadn't been speaking metaphorically. He literally hungered for more than food. That evening, when she served her meal representing longing, dishes inspired by places she'd dreamed of visiting, flavors she'd yearned to master, she watched Vexlor with new understanding. Each bite he took was an exchange, a form of communication more direct than words. You understand now, he said, noticing her gaze. It wasn't a question. I'm beginning to, she admitted. Vexlor's whiter-than-human mouth curved. Most of your kind find our method of connection disturbing. Too revealing. It's certainly different, Talia said carefully. In human culture, we don't usually share our emotions so directly. Inefficient, Vexlor commented. Through consumption, there can be no deception, no misunderstanding. As he finished the meal, his skin rippled with deep blues and purples, colors she hadn't seen from him before. Tomorrow, he said, prepare a meal that expresses fear. Talia stiffened. I don't know if I. You have fears, Chef Reed. His tone was matter-of-fact. All beings do. I wish to understand them. That night, Talia barely slept, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. Sharing joy and longing was one thing. But fear? That felt too personal, too vulnerable, especially now that she understood exactly what Vexlor was doing. Yet by morning, a strange realization had dawned. In her previous restaurant, she'd poured her soul into dishes that diners consumed without a second thought. At least Vexlor truly appreciated what she was sharing. She entered the kitchen with new resolve. If the ambassador wanted to taste fear, she would give him something to remember. The kitchen fell silent save for the soft hiss of pressure releasing from a pot and the rhythmic sound of Talia's knife against the cutting board. Each ingredient she selected for today's meal was chosen with deliberate intent, each preparation method carefully considered. Fear was not a simple emotion to translate into food. It wasn't just about creating something shocking or unpleasant, that would be too obvious, too shallow. Real fear ran deeper. She settled on a menu that told the story of her greatest fears, a starter of bitter greens with unexpected pockets of intense heat, representing the fear of losing control, a main course featuring a protein that appeared familiar but tasted utterly foreign, embodying the fear of the unknown, and a dessert that seemed perfect on the surface but concealed a hollow center, reflecting her fear of inadequacy. As she worked, Raj entered carrying a tablet. The ambassador has requested something additional for tonight, he said, sliding the tablet toward her. He wants to, and I quote, reciprocate the exchange. Talia wiped her hands and picked up the device. The screen displayed instructions for preparing a ZK theory dish, along with a small container of ingredients she'd never seen before. "What is this?" she asked, examining the strange, luminescent components. "Vexlor wishes to prepare part of tonight's meal for you," Raj explained, looking as surprised as she felt. Apparently, this is unusual. The cultural attaché nearly fainted when she heard. "Is it safe for humans to eat?" "It's been analyzed. Compatible with human digestion, though the effects might be intense." Talia raised an eyebrow. "Effects? Remember how ZK-Theri absorb emotional resonances from food? Well, when they prepare food for others, they can deliberately infuse it with their own emotional states." Raj hesitated. "It's considered an extremely intimate gesture in their culture. Like sharing a part of their consciousness." After Raj departed, Talia stared at the container of alien ingredients. Was she ready for this level of exchange? She barely knew Vexlor, and what she did know was intimidating. Yet curiosity won out over caution. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to experience something truly alien. When Vexlor arrived that evening, his demeanor was different, more formal, almost ceremonial. "You have prepared a meal expressing fear," he stated, surveying her creations. "Yes," Talia confirmed. "And I've set aside space for your contribution, as requested." Vexlor produced a small case from within his robes. "This is not required of you. To receive thoughts from another species is not a simple experience." "I'm curious," Talia admitted. "And it seems only fair, given what you've been experiencing from my cooking." Something like approval flickered across Vexlor's features. Without further comment, he moved to the preparation area she'd designated and began working with the ingredients he'd brought. His long fingers moved with unexpected grace, combining components that shifted and changed color as they touched. Talia served her dishes first, watching Vexlor consume each one with his now familiar intensity. As he tasted her interpretations of fear, his skin darkened to deep indigo, with occasional flashes of brighter colors like lightning in a storm cloud. "Your species experiences fear differently than mine," he observed between courses. "You fear isolation. Failure. The unknown. Don't the ZK-Theri fear those things? We fear stagnation. The inability to absorb new experiences. To a ZK-Theri, the greatest horror is to remain unchanged." He fixed all four eyes on her. "Your fears are revealing, Chef Reed. You fear most what you are most capable of overcoming." The statement left her momentarily speechless. Before she could formulate a response, Vexlor rose and retrieved the dish he had prepared, a small bowl containing what looked like glowing blue pearls suspended in amber liquid. "This will allow you to understand what cannot be explained," he said, placing it before her. "It contains memories from my first arrival on Earth. The experience of alienness." Talia hesitated only briefly before taking a spoonful. The texture was unlike anything she'd ever encountered, simultaneously solid and liquid, dissolving instantly against her tongue. The flavor defied description, neither sweet nor savory, but somehow both and neither. Then the sensation began. It started as a tingling at the base of her skull, spreading outward until her entire consciousness seemed to expand. Suddenly, she wasn't just herself, she was experiencing fragments of Vexlor's memories, feeling what he had felt. The overwhelming bombardment of unfamiliar sensory input. The struggle to interpret human expressions and gestures that had no equivalent in ZK-Theri culture. The constant, exhausting effort to translate concepts that existed in one language but not the other. The profound isolation of being the only one of his kind among billions of others. Most striking was the hunger, not physical, but a deep, primal need to connect, to absorb, to understand through consumption what could not be understood through observation alone. When the experience faded, Talia found herself gripping the edge of the table, tears streaming down her face. Across from her, Vexlor watched with all four eyes half-lidded, his skin pulsing with subdued colors. "Now you understand," he said quietly. What I seek is not merely nutrition or pleasure, but comprehension. Connection. Yes, Talia whispered, still reeling from the intensity of the experience. I had no idea it was so complete. For my species, this is communication in its purest form. Vexlor's voice took on a more formal tone. What you have experienced is rarely shared with non-Zk. It signifies trust. Thank you, she said, meaning it. For trusting me with this. You have shown courage, Chef Reed. First in your willingness to share your emotions through your cooking, and now in your acceptance of mine. He rose from the table. Tomorrow, a delegation from the Zk collective will arrive. They must be satisfied as I have been. Talia straightened, professional instincts kicking in despite her emotional exhaustion. How many guests? What will they expect? 7 delegates, plus myself. They will expect to taste Earth, not merely its foods, but its essence. His expression became more intense. This meal will determine whether the collective pursues deeper relations with your planet or withdraws entirely. The weight of his words settled on her shoulders. What had begun as an unusual chef position had somehow transformed into a critical diplomatic mission. I'll need more staff, she said, mind already racing through the logistics. I have arranged for assistance with preparation, but the creative direction must be yours. Vexlor moved toward the door, then paused. The meal must express what it means to be human, Chef Reed. Nothing less will satisfy. After he departed, Talia sat alone in the kitchen, the lingering effects of Vexlor's food still resonating through her consciousness. She now understood that what the ambassador had asked of her from the beginning wasn't strange or inappropriate, it was the only way his species truly knew how to connect. Tomorrow, she would need to create more than a meal. She would need to create an experience that represented humanity itself. Dawn broke over the embassy, but Talia had been awake for hours. She stood at the kitchen window, watching the soft morning light illuminate the city while her mind raced through final preparations. How did one distill the essence of humanity into a single meal? The kitchen doors swung open, and Raj entered with 3 nervous-looking assistants in tow. Your reinforcements, he announced. All with top security clearance and basic knowledge of Zk dietary needs. Talia nodded, assessing them quickly. I'm Chef Reed. We have approximately 10 hours to create the most important meal of our careers, possibly the most important meal in human history. One of the assistants, a young man with close-cropped hair, actually gulped. I've prepared detailed instructions, Talia continued, gesturing to neatly organized workstations. Each of you will be responsible for specific components. Questions can wait until after I've explained the concept. She led them to a large whiteboard where she'd sketched out her vision, not just a menu, but a narrative journey through human experience. The Zk don't just taste food, they absorb emotions and memories associated with it, she explained. Today's meal isn't just about flavors, it's about conveying what it means to be human. For the next hour, she outlined her plan, 7 courses, each representing a fundamental aspect of human existence. Birth, represented by simple, primal flavors. Childhood, exploration, love, conflict, resilience, and finally, hope, all translated into carefully choreographed dishes. By mid-morning, the kitchen hummed with focused activity. Talia moved between stations, tasting, adjusting, guiding. Despite her outward calm, anxiety churned beneath the surface. What if she'd misunderstood what Vexlor wanted? What if her interpretation of humanity didn't resonate with the delegates? Raj returned at noon, his expression grave. The delegation has arrived early. They're touring the facility and will be ready for the banquet at 6 instead of 7. Talia's stomach dropped, but she kept her voice steady. We'll be ready. Once Raj left, she gathered her team. Change of plans. We've lost an hour of prep time. The young assistant, Marcus, she'd learned, looked panicked. But the fermentation process for the third course. We'll adapt, Talia interrupted. Cooking is problem-solving. Let's solve. They redistributed tasks, simplified a few components, and accelerated others. Talia felt a strange calm descend as she worked, the familiar clarity that came in moments of kitchen crisis. This was her element. This was what she was born to do. At 5:30, Talia dismissed her assistants for a break before service began. Alone in the kitchen, she surveyed their work. Each dish was perfect in its execution, but would it be enough? Would the ZK theory understand what she was trying to convey? Vexlor entered silently, his tall frame filling the doorway. Your companions are most interested in this meal, he said. Some were skeptical about my reports regarding human cuisine. Talia wiped her hands on her apron. I hope we won't disappoint them. Disappointment is not a concern, Vexlor said. Understanding is. He moved closer, studying the preparations. You have created something complex. I've created something honest, Talia replied. You asked me to express what it means to be human. That's not simple. Vexlor's skin rippled with colors she hadn't seen before, muted golds and warm ambers. The others have not had the benefit of our previous exchanges. They will experience your work without context. Will that be a problem? It will be illuminating. He turned to leave, then paused. The future relationship between our species may depend on tonight's meal, Chef Reed. But that burden is not yours alone to bear. Remember, we hunger to understand, not to judge. Those words stayed with Talia as she and her team made final preparations. At precisely 6 o'clock, they transported the first course to the diplomatic dining chamber, a grand room designed with both human and ZK theory aesthetics in mind. 8 ZK theory sat around a circular table, their height and iridescent skin making them seem almost mythological in the room's soft lighting. Vexlor, distinguished by subtle markings on his face, made introductions in their native language, a series of musical clicks and hums that the translators didn't convert. Talia remained composed as she presented the first course, a simple, clear broth with a single ravioli floating in its center. This represents the beginning of human experience, she explained, her voice steadier than she expected. The broth symbolizes the waters of birth, nourishing and protective. Inside the ravioli is a concentration of primal flavors, salt, representing our origins in the sea, sweetness, our first comfort, umami, our connection to the earth. The delegates regarded her with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. As they consumed the dish, Talia watched their skin colors shift, some subtly, others dramatically. One delegate in particular, with markings similar to Vexlor's but in different patterns, displayed rapid color changes across their entire body. This pattern continued through each course. The childhood dish, a playful construction of familiar flavors presented in unexpected ways, elicited what Talia interpreted as amusement from several delegates. The exploration course, featuring ingredients from all 7 continents, prompted intense discussion in their native language. By the fourth course, representing love through a harmonious balance of contrasting elements, even the most skeptical-seeming delegate was showing signs of engagement, their skin pulsing with rich purples and blues. The conflict course was perhaps the most daring, intentionally challenging flavors that initially seemed discordant but resolved into harmony with each subsequent bite. Talia held her breath as they tasted it, relieved when their reactions suggested understanding rather than offense. For resilience, she served a dish that had been partially charred, then transformed into something beautiful and complex, vegetables that had been fire-roasted, then glazed with honey and herbs, served alongside grains that had been nearly burned before being rescued. Throughout the meal, Talia narrated each course briefly, then withdrew to allow the ZK theory to experience and discuss among themselves. Vexlor occasionally translated portions of their conversation, but much remained private. Finally, it was time for the seventh course, Hope. Talia had labored over this dish more than any other. It featured an array of small bites, each representing different possible futures, arranged around a central element that combined flavors from both Earth and the few ZK-theory ingredients she had been permitted to use. As the delegates consumed this final offering, a profound hush fell over the room. Their skin colors synchronized gradually into a pulsating pattern of deep blue interspersed with points of brilliant white light, like a night sky filled with stars. Vexlor rose from his seat, his own skin matching the pattern of his companions. "Chef Reed," he said, his voice resonating strangely in the silence, "you have given us much to consume." Talia bowed slightly, unsure of the proper protocol. "I hope it was satisfying." "It was more than satisfying," said the delegate who had shown the most dramatic color changes. The translator rendered their voice as feminine. "It was illuminating." Another delegate spoke, their colors shifting to include swirls of green. "We came seeking to understand if humans were compatible partners. We did not expect to find such depth. Your species experiences existence very differently from ours," added a third, "yet there are harmonies we did not anticipate." Vexlor turned to Talia, all four eyes gleaming. "The delegation wishes to extend an invitation. They request your presence at tomorrow's diplomatic session. Your perspective would be valued." Talia looked around at the delegates, all watching her with that unsettling, multi-eyed intensity. She had prepared meals for presidents and celebrities, but never had she felt so evaluated, so seen. "I would be honored," she said finally. As the delegates filed out, Vexlor remained behind. "You have done more than prepare food, Chef Reed. You have translated humanity in a way our diplomats and scientists could not." "I just cooked what I know," Talia said modestly. "What you know," Vexlor replied, "is what it means to be human. And that, it seems, is exactly what we hungered to understand." 3 months after the banquet, Talia stood in her now familiar kitchen at the Nexus Embassy, watching the sunset paint the Washington skyline in hues of orange and pink. The events following the delegation's visit had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. The morning after the banquet, she had attended the diplomatic session as requested, expecting merely to observe. Instead, she found herself invited to the table, asked to provide what the ZK theory called the perspective of creation on various proposed agreements between their species. What began as a one-time consultation evolved into a permanent position, culinary ambassador to the ZK theory collective. In addition to preparing meals for important diplomatic functions, she served as a cultural interpreter, helping bridge the gap between human and ZK theory understanding. "Your preparations are complete?" Vexlor's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Over the months, she had grown accustomed to his sudden appearances. "Yes," she replied, gesturing to the covered dishes awaiting transportation to the dining chamber. "Though I'm still not sure this is the right approach for tonight's negotiation. The trade representatives will respond well to your interpretation of their concerns," Vexlor assured her. In the months they had worked together, his formal manner had softened slightly, though he remained inscrutable at times. Talia had come to understand that the ZK theory experienced the world fundamentally differently than humans. They processed reality through consumption and absorption rather than mere observation. What had initially seemed strange, even invasive, now made a certain kind of sense. "Ambassador," she began, using his formal title deliberately, "there's something I need to discuss with you." All four of Vexlor's eyes focused on her with that now familiar intensity. "Proceed." "I received an offer yesterday. From the diplomatic corps. They want me to join the first human delegation to your homeworld." She watched his skin carefully for color changes as she continued. "It would mean leaving Earth for at least 2 years." Vexlor remained still, his colors muted. "This troubles you." "It's a big decision," Talia admitted. "I'd be the first human chef to cook on another planet, helping establish relations between our worlds. But I'd be leaving everything familiar behind. You fear the unknown, Vexlor observed, echoing their conversation from months ago. Yet you have demonstrated remarkable adaptability. It's not just fear, Talia said, trying to articulate the complex emotions she was feeling. It's also about purpose. Would I be doing this for the right reasons? Would I really be helping build something meaningful between our species, or would I just be a novelty, the human chef who feeds aliens? Vexlor moved to the preparation table, his long fingers tracing patterns on its surface. When I first came to Earth, I experienced a profound disconnection. Your species communicates primarily through words, symbols that approximate meaning but rarely convey it fully. My kind found this inefficient. Frustrating. He turned to face her. Then I found you. A human who understood, intuitively, that true communication requires more than words. You gave us taste when we needed understanding. I just cooked, Talia said, echoing her words from the night of the banquet. You did far more, Vexlor countered. You translated humanity. You made us comprehensible to the ZK theory, and the ZK theory comprehensible to humanity. His skin began to shift into the deep blue with points of light that she now recognized as the ZK theory expression of profound realization. The diplomatic corps offers you an opportunity to continue this work, he continued. Not as a novelty, but as an essential bridge between worlds that experience reality in fundamentally different ways. Talia sighed, leaning against the counter. I'd have to learn everything again. New ingredients, new techniques, new equipment. Yes, Vexlor interrupted. And in doing so, you would help the ZK theory learn what it means to be human, just as you would learn what it means to be ZK theory. He moved toward the dishes she had prepared, his colors shifting again. Consider tonight's meal. You have created dishes that express complex trade concepts, reciprocity, sustainability, mutual benefit, in forms that can be absorbed and understood by beings who process information through consumption. That's my job, Talia said with a small smile. A job no other human has performed with such satisfaction. Vexlor's mouth curved in what she now recognized as his version of a smile. On our homeworld, you would be more than a chef. You would be a translator of experiences. One of the kitchen assistants entered, signaling that it was time to transport the meal to the dining chamber. As the staff carefully moved the dishes, Talia remained deep in thought. Later that evening, after the trade negotiation had concluded successfully, Talia found herself alone in the embassy garden. The space had been designed with both human and ZK theory aesthetics in mind, earth plants interspersed with strange, luminescent flora from the collective's homeworld. Your meal was most illuminating, said a voice behind her. She turned to find Nexera, the senior trade representative, approaching with the characteristic fluid movements of the ZK theory. I'm glad it helped the negotiations, Talia replied. More than helped. It clarified. Nexera's skin rippled with colors that reminded Talia of autumn leaves. Ambassador Vexlor speaks highly of your abilities. He believes you would thrive on our homeworld. Talia raised an eyebrow. He's discussed this with you? The possibility of your assignment has generated much interest among the High Council, Nexera confirmed. We have never had a human who could communicate through consumption before. The representative moved closer, studying Talia with all four eyes. May I offer what your people would call a personal observation? Please. You humans are bound by physical place in ways my kind finds curious. You speak of home as a fixed location. Nexera gestured to the hybrid garden around them. Yet you create home wherever you go, transforming environments to reflect your inner selves. Talia considered this. I suppose we do. On our world, you would not be without home. You would simply expand your understanding of what home can be. Nexera's colors shifted to the starfield pattern that indicated profound significance. And in doing so, you would help us understand yours. After the representative departed, Talia remained in the garden, watching the strange alien plants glow in the darkness. 3 months ago, she had been a chef seeking a better-paying job. Now she was considering leaving her planet to become an interstellar cultural ambassador. The following morning, she found Vexlor in his office, reviewing documents on a screen that displayed unfamiliar ZK-Theory script. "I've made my decision," she announced without preamble. All 4 of Vexlor's eyes turned to her. He waited silently. "I'll accept the assignment to the collective homeworld," Talia said, "on one condition." "State your terms." "I want to establish a permanent culinary exchange program. Not just me going to your world, but eventually bringing ZK-Theory food preparers to Earth. A true cultural bridge." Vexlor's skin rippled with colors she interpreted as approval. "Your vision extends beyond your own experience. This is satisfying." "I thought it might be," Talia said with a smile. "After all, both our species hunger for more than food. We hunger for understanding." "Indeed." Vexlor rose from his desk. "The arrangements will be made. You have 6 Earth weeks to prepare for departure." As she turned to leave, Vexlor spoke again. "Chef Reed." She paused at the door. "Yes, Ambassador. When we first met, I asked if you would satisfy me." His skin displayed colors she had come to associate with sincere appreciation. "You have done far more. You have nourished understanding between worlds." Talia nodded, feeling a sense of purpose stronger than any she had known before. "That's what good food does, Ambassador. It brings people together, no matter how different they might seem." 6 weeks later, Talia stood at the boarding ramp of the ZK-Theory vessel that would take her to their homeworld. Her family and friends had gathered to see her off, along with Raj and the kitchen staff she had trained. "Ready for the greatest culinary adventure in human history?" Raj asked as he helped her with the last of her equipment, specially designed knives and tools that would allow her to prepare Earth cuisine in an alien environment. "As ready as I'll ever be," Talia replied, looking up at the sleek, iridescent ship. "Though I'm still not sure how to pack for a 2-year trip to another solar system." "Just remember what you told me when you started this job," Raj said with a grin. "How many chefs get to put this on their resume?" Talia laughed, then grew serious. "Take care of the embassy kitchen. I want it in perfect condition when I return. With recipes from another world, I hope," Raj called as she ascended the ramp. Inside the ship, Vexlor waited to escort her to her quarters. As the hatch sealed behind them and the vessel prepared for departure, Talia felt a moment of panic. What was she doing? Leaving Earth for an alien world where she would be the only human among millions of ZK-Theory? Vexlor must have noticed her distress, as his skin displayed colors of reassurance. "The journey between worlds is always challenging, Chef Reed. But remember, you have already bridged a greater distance than mere light years." Talia took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Through food. Through understanding," Vexlor corrected gently. "You satisfied a hunger more fundamental than any craving for sustenance. You satisfied the hunger to be known." As the ship lifted off, carrying her toward a future she could barely imagine, Talia reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. From a simple chef to a bridge between worlds, all because she understood that at the heart of every meal was a story waiting to be told, and at the heart of every being, no matter how alien, was a hunger to share that story with others. It wasn't just about food. It never had been. It was about connection, the universal hunger that transcended species and worlds. And that was a hunger she knew exactly how to satisfy.